This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Football fans, the 13th annual Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic returns to Wayne State University August 24th through the 26th. The Midwest's premier season-opening prep football showcase will be highlighted by 7 must-see games featuring the region's top teams and players. For more information, visit DetroitSports.org. Brought to you by Zenith, an innovative Detroit-based football helmet and equipment manufacturer. UAW Ford, Legacy Football Organization, and Performance Orthopedics. The Prep Kickoff Classic. The season starts here.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going?
Vito, great to have you in studio on this rainy Tuesday. Always enjoy the podcast recording. Man, Vito, last week was super tough being a Detroit Tigers fan. They lost all games from Sunday to Saturday. Finally broke their 6-game losing streak, winning on Sunday, but it was a tough week. Earlier this year, they did the same thing, losing all games from Sunday to Saturday, and last week was really tough to watch. I mean, you had a series versus Texas in which the offense for Texas was able to do some things. Then you go play the Dodgers at home at Comerica Park, and the Dodgers, my goodness, you and I know were peeking in intently to watch a team assembled like that. And oh my goodness, they did not fail to deliver. Key hits all over the place, solid pitching, solid bullpen. Even during last weekend, they go off and pull off a trade with the New York Mets, bringing in Curtis Granderson. The L.A. Dodgers, my goodness, watching them up close and personal, you have to be impressed. What an organization right now. What a team.
But no matter how great your season is, regular season, it does not guarantee playoff success, especially in Major League Baseball come October, where so much can happen. So many variables are there. And the Dodgers have a guy in Clayton Kershaw who's been injury-prone in recent memory and also hasn't had the greatest postseason success. Losing now, the Dodgers did to the Cubs last year in the NLCS. If the Cubs get back to the postseason, which is not a definite either at this point, well, if they get back there, I've got to believe that the Cubs pose the most legit threat to dethroning the Dodgers from getting to the World Series, preventing the Dodgers from getting to the Fall Classic, in my opinion.
And stay with us later in this podcast. I'll ask Vito, I'll put him to the test. Does he think this Dodgers team and the way they're playing, are they capable of winning a World Series? Stay tuned later on in the podcast for that. But talking about the Detroit Tigers, Vito, lots to get into, lots of drama. Let's first start off with Ian Kinsler and the events that took place in Texas on the road. Vito, I think you and I are going to be in agreement that the fine that Major League Baseball handed down to Ian Kinsler in regards to the remarks that he made regarding umpire Angel Hernandez may be a little bit too much. A $10,000 fine? Really? I'm kind of upset by it because of the fact that Rob Manfred and everybody that watches baseball should know what Hernandez brings to the table, and to single out Ian Kinsler, it's kind of a tough situation, and Brad Ausmus called out Major League Baseball and said, hey, why are you guys calling out my guy in regards to an umpire who was making egregious calls during the Texas series, and a guy that many people across Major League Baseball view as an incompetent umpire? And so I want to ask you 2 questions. 1, do you think that fine was justified? And 2, the umpires took a stand against Major League Baseball wearing these wristbands saying, look, there is an issue with disrespect, and Major League Baseball, hey, you can't allow these players to come up and disrespect us like that, when Ian Kinsler said, I expect to get suspended for what I said, and then you just slap him with a fine. And so the umpires are upset, and it's something to talk about too, because there is something going on in terms of how much respect players have for umpires and how much should there be, because it does trickle down to the minor leagues. It does trickle down to Little League Baseball and how kids and parents treat umpires, and we'll talk about that. But what was your take on this whole umpire situation last week?
Well, I think it was a fine that was made in order to get these players not to lash out as often at the umpires, because the umpires union, remember, ended up wearing those wristbands, and had the solidarity where they came together against players, and these players are lashing out at them. So this is aimed at this big of a fine, which is pretty much unheard of, as Brad Ausmus said himself, in terms of player fines, was made in order or in attempt to deter these players from lashing out nearly as often and just utterly criticizing these umps when it is called for at times, but it's how much you go along with it. How much do you show up the ump? Because legitimately, there's no place for showing up an umpire. And you know what? To call somebody the worst at his or her given profession, as Ian Kinsler pretty much did or directly did, referring to Angel Hernandez, that's a little bit uncalled for too, because guess what? I don't think it's ever right when you call somebody out as the worst at your given profession. Unless they do something harmful to you, to ruin your life, to harm your family, why go to that extent to call that person out about his or her given profession? And for me, I don't really feel too bad for Ian Kinsler in terms of the fine when he makes all the money that he does. Remember, too, it's a lot of money, millions of dollars, making $11 million this season, from my knowledge. So for him to receive a $10,000 fine, that's like pennies to him.
See, Vito, the issue at hand regarding what the umpires are talking about is, look, we have to kind of curb this, because if we allow a player like Ian Kinsler to talk trash like that to that degree, where we say, hey, we let this guy kind of call out Angel Hernandez and call him out and say, hey, this guy should change professions, he's the worst at what he does, that sets a precedent. And I can agree with you in that they want to curb it. But at the same time, what do fans like myself, what do people that watch baseball game in and game out, what do they complain about regarding Major League Baseball umpires? The word is accountability. And the issue at hand involves when an umpire obviously doesn't do a great job, and now you got replays and you got a system to evaluate how an umpire's doing, right? You have a system. Many people like myself feel like if an umpire stinks, because of the fact that they're protected so heavily by a union, guys like Joe West, guys like Angel Hernandez, guys that obviously aren't as good as other umpires get to stay on the job for way too long. It's not like Angel Hernandez just came out of the blue and started being incompetent. This guy's been around for damn near 2 decades. And so my thinking is you cannot have a Major League Baseball umpire union where they say to the fans, we're evaluated tough every single game. It's something where there is accountability. And then and then in the same breath, you look at Angel Hernandez, who makes mistake after mistake, and he's still umpiring games and still in the league. So that's my reasoning in terms of being angry at the umpires. If a guy's not doing his job, you got to move him out, despite the fact that there's a union. There has to be real accountability, which means if you can't call balls and strikes effectively, there is an underground movement to remove umpires altogether and just go to a robotic system similar to Fox Tracks and let the computers call balls and strikes because it'll be right. I personally don't agree with that. I like the nuance of having an umpire, but I would like more accountability where if an umpire stinks and there's a certain percentage that replays are getting overturned with a high level of frequency, you got to get the guy out. Angel Hernandez shouldn't be an umpire anymore. I agree with Ian Kinsler.
Now, the World Umpires Associated is the union responsible for representing Major League Baseball umpires. And just really quick, I wanted to say that what if this would have happened to Mike Trout or Bryce Harper? Would the fine have been as steep for a guy like that in his prime, who is a respective face, right? One of the biggest faces in Major League Baseball today. Would the fine have been as severe for one of those two guys if they would have criticized a home plate umpire, Doc?
In watching the games throughout the season, you recall we've had talks in terms of what Joe West did to Jimenez, in terms of, Joe Jimenez was throwing strikes almost right down the middle, and they're being called balls, which significantly influences Jimenez in that he's got to be a lot more tight, and he can't even work around the corners of the plate. And a guy like that, you go, hey, wait a minute, you're affecting Jimenez's career. Guys like Bruce Rondon, you got to be able to kind of paint the corners. And if you don't call those balls and strikes, you're affecting their livelihood. A guy like Bruce Rondon has been up and down in the minors, and there's been several games that I've watched where umpires are really squeezing the Detroit Tigers and not being consistent. Now, to your point, obviously, when superstars don't get calls and they start making a stink, that's when action happens, obviously. But a guy like Ian Kinsler has enough respect around the league where it made news, and Brad Ausmus is talking about it, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. But at the same time, what do you think of the umpires banding together? And the reason why I asked that question is, you're right. You can't really have players spewing off that level of disrespect towards umpires. of course you're going to be angry. Of course you probably have the right to say it. But here's the problem. Here's some of the lasting consequences when you do that. Now you got parents in little leagues. You got kids who are looking to umpires, and it has been well documented in the media. And Vito, it happened here locally in Detroit, in Dearborn. A soccer player got mad at a ref's call. He punched him, killed the man. It's happening a lot more where referees, umpires are coming out and saying, look, we're under attack. In Europe, in the United States, umpires are very much under attack, and there have been a lot of chaotic scenes where parents after a football game will follow a referee after, a tough call or after a significant call that might have cost their kid's team a game. And there is significant footage available that you can go watch of parents knocking out and starting brawls with umpires. So they see that, and umpires are trying to make this stand and make this case that, hey, if Major League Baseball, if the commissioner, Rob Manfred, if he allows Ian Kinsler to spew off like that, what's next? So it's a very interesting debate regarding what the umpires did, and I don't blame them for unifying. I just think all around they got to do a better job in terms of umpiring games and making the calls correct, because pretty soon, I probably would assume in the next 15 years, there's somehow going to be incorporating the video technology. Not where they're going to use it probably pitch by pitch, but a manager probably will have the opportunity to review 5 calls via the electronics, and it'll allow the game to be, it'll allow the challenge to be extended, similar to tennis.
Well, the thing is, too, I wonder if what Ian Kinsler has done here starts the trend. Major League Baseball going even in a more rapid movement towards the utilization of technology for balls and strikes being called even. Maybe having more, an influence with robots, an actual incorporation of robotic technology used to call balls and strikes on a consistent game-to-game basis.
Do you want
what
that?
if Ian Kinsler has started that trend?
Do you want that? Do you want to see the electronics call balls and strikes, remove umpires from behind the plate?
I think it would help out to some extent, right? I mean, but I think you want the human element too. The thing is, would the home plate umpire still be there for calls made at the plate when a guy's trying to score? Right? I think he would be for that purpose. So the home plate ump would still be needed. The thing is, how much would that umpires union fight that too? The incorporation of robots to call the balls and strikes instead of humans themselves.
Well, Vito, you have a point. Real Sports definitely took on this issue as well. And what would happen is, if you use the electronics, they would the umpires would have an earpiece in their ear, and the way the system is set up is they monitor it through the earpiece, and they relay the call to the umpire, who then makes it. So then it comes real quick, because the technology is so good right now. Within an instant, the technology will know if it's a ball and strike. So you still could have the umpire there, just not making the calls. Would you think that...
Well, the umpire would fight it. The umpire would not want that. The umpires would protest and wouldn't even show up. Rob Manfred would have a legit issue on his hands, and a huge one that would spiral perhaps out of control too.
But it could be a situation, Vito, where it's easier. I mean, the umpires take a lot of grief. It's really hard to call balls and strikes nowadays. You get to be out there, and you get a chance to be a part of the action. You just don't have to make the calls. It makes, actually, umpires should legitimately, if they have a discussion, if they can maybe get some more money, I think they would agree to it, because of the fact that the calls will be right, somebody else will be doing the work. They're basically just the figureheads in terms of relaying the message from the technology to the fans, whether it's a ball or a strike, and you remove the heat that all the players have for umpires. I think it's not a bad idea, but
Well, you would like it. Let me just say this. You would like it
great,
to be
man.
lazy. You could eat a hot dog. You and Joe West be eating hot dogs behind home plate, and you could see that these bigger umpires are just guys that, hey, don't want to maybe give as much effort anymore, who are up there in age or at least middle age.
And
hey, they'd be eating hot dogs.
If you want some extra attention, if you have that ego, then you could have the flair for the dramatics when there's a strike. When there's a strike call, you just wave your hand up in the air, do some dancing, or, those guys that take their sweet-ass time to make the strike call. They extend their arms like, strike! You could make it a very fun thing if you want to be so inclined to get attention. But it'll be interesting to see how this progresses. But it was not a good week for Major League Baseball and their umpires and the union in general, because of the fact that they got to get it right. You can't have Angel Hernandez making egregious calls. Did you see the call later in the series? I think the next day, or the series finale, when Kinsler was playing second base and Angel Hernandez was covering second. I believe there was a steal attempt, and Angel Hernandez called the guy safe, and he was right there against the Tigers, and he was obviously out. there was a review, and Angel Hernandez messed up the call blatantly right in front of him. He called the guy safe, I believe, and James McCann, I believe, threw the guy out.
Well, let me just say this. If umpires are doing that where they're trying to get players back for offending them, well, that's wrong too. So, you know what? It's wrong for what Ian Kinsler did, in my opinion, in terms of berating the umpire, berating Angel Hernandez, that is. But if Hernandez then is trying to get back at Ian Kinsler by not making the out call at second base for a force out, whatever it may be, well, a force out at second base where Ian Kinsler is involved on the play, well, that's wrong. That's wrong of him. That's erroneous of him. Not only that he made the wrong call, but also that he's taking it out on Ian Kinsler. You have to keep your emotions inside of you, right? When that's the case, when you don't like somebody, you don't like something that they did to you, as they say when you got a kid, right? When the kid's grown up, don't you teach the kid, hey, you know, if that person wrongs you, you can't take it out on them. You can't retaliate, you know? You got to just, I guess, to a certain extent, you have to keep it to yourself. Unless they really, really antagonize you or bother you tremendously, consistently. But, you know, over one thing that Kinsler didn't like, and maybe there have been other, you know, incidents or instances where Kinsler didn't like a call made by Angel Hernandez in the past, since Kinsler's been around so long and Angel Hernandez obviously has been around so long. But I would just say Angel Hernandez then possibly taking it out on Ian Kinsler and calling a guy safe at second when he was clearly out, if that was the case, well, that's wrong. That's where he's going awry and looking very bad and petty. Looking very petty is what the adjective that I would use to describe Angel Hernandez too in that instance, Doc.
What was your takeaway from the Tigers-Rangers series?
Well, Tigers can't pitch is what it comes down to, especially with the back end of the rotation. And until recently, Fulmer hadn't looked that great, you know, and his first start off the DL didn't look that great. Now, against the Dodgers over the weekend, him and Verlander back-to-back quality outings. Fulmer looked really sharp. Verlander, extremely sharp, had that no-hitter, and who broke it up? The guy the Dodgers traded for over the weekend, and former Tigers great and center fielder, Curtis Granderson, playing down the corner outfield, hit it off the foul pole, as it's called, which is really the fair pole, right? Should be called the fair pole. It's called the foul pole. But Granderson is a guy that broke it up this past Sunday. And it's hard not to root for that guy, huh? Such a stand-up dude, classy guy, full of character. And it seems like just morals and strong values, right? That you want your kids to watch and to model as well. So if you can get your kid, and if we can replicate what Granderson does as a human being, man, off the baseball field, I think we're all better off that way.
Why did the Dodgers make a move for outfielder Curtis Granderson?
Jock Peterson, one of their young guys, standout young guys, power hitters, has been struggling. Hitting, I believe, below 200 in recent memory. He was sent down because of his struggle. So Curtis Granderson is that extra outfielder to have, that fourth outfielder who provides a lot of good depth and pop still in the corner outfield spot. And really both corner outfield spots for the Dodgers.
In talking about the starting pitching, it is very much a concern for the Detroit Tigers this season. One of the big reasons why the team has struggled in terms of quality starts. When Michael Fulmer doesn't have it, or when it's the turn for Jordan Zimmermann to go out there, I think we got to talk about now, is Jordan Zimmermann's contract going to be an albatross for this team? Because each and every opportunity that he's been getting the last few weeks, it's been really tough to watch. I mean, Brad Ausmus will come out and say he has to command the slider. He has to be able to use other pitches. Otherwise, his fastball is going to be predictable and it's going to get hit. But when you look at it, his miles per hour are down. He's giving up way too many home runs. When it's Jordan Zimmermann's turn in the rotation, he's not giving the Tigers a legitimate chance to win. And this dude's making $20 million plus for the next couple seasons. You can't even give this guy away if the reports are true that they tried to package Zimmermann with Verlander. There is nobody in their right mind that's a general manager that's been looking, that's watched any baseball at all in the last month, that's seen what Jordan Zimmermann has been doing and would think, yeah, I want to bring this guy on. Jordan Zimmermann is a guy I think that probably has to take a lot of blame in terms of the lack of success of the Detroit Tigers starters.
Well, it's him. It's Anibal, obviously, too. It's a few guys. It's Matt Boyd, Daniel Norris, who's been hurt now, got hurt in a rehab outing. It's hurt his recovery. Will he be the same when he comes back now in a limited amount of time that he has left in the season to pitch? And like I said, so it's a combination of factors and of guys in the Tigers rotation not being consistently effective this year for the Tigers' profound struggles as a pitching staff.
When we look at it for next year, let's just say, for example, Justin Verlander is back. You're going to have Fulmer, Verlander, and Jordan Zimmerman again in the rotation. So Verlander, another year older. Is he going to continue at the same clip? Jordan Zimmerman, 2/3 of your starting rotation, you have question marks. Again, many people are assuming that once Daniel Norris and Boyd work it out this year, they're going to be given another opportunity next year. Big question marks. I'm not exactly confident with the future of the rotation behind star pitcher Michael Fulmer. Outside of him, I'm not confident of anybody.
I think Norris can be all right, though, because he's dealt with injuries this year. If the injury bug doesn't hurt him as much next year, I think he can be a steady performer as a number 3, maybe a frontline arm one day. But he has to get full health and back to that first, too.
I'm waving my finger in disagreement with what you said because, more importantly, there's a bigger issue with Daniel Norris. It's between the ears. Many people are calling him out for mental weakness. They're saying that once things go bad, like, for example, he starts off a game, he gets a couple strikeouts, smooth sailing in the first, second inning. Then he hits struggle in the third inning. Let's say maybe a call doesn't go his way. He loses it. He has an issue mentally in terms of staying sharp throughout the course of 7 innings in which you need to be mentally strong. There's going to be calls that don't go your way. There's going to be outfield blunders. There's going to be situations that don't go your way. And time again, many have noted that the mental game for Daniel Norris has to improve drastically in order for him to take that next step. Because right now, everybody and fans are viewing him as just another arm. He's got to take that next step. Otherwise, you're going to start looking at this guy as a bust and shipping his ass out of here.
Yeah, he's still young, though, and once again, the injury bug has nagged him, so I go back to that and reflect on that big time for him for his struggles, because last year he was great. You know, he had all those consecutive quality outings in a row, a string of 10 plus, maybe even 20 straight quality outings that he threw last year coming into this season too. And then he struggled after that, and big time for the most part. But isn't it injuries that we can blame it upon too? Maybe a little bit of a lack of mental aptitude or fortitude as well, and something, missing in his head that doesn't allow him maybe to persevere in a game and to get past mistakes made by his outfielders or infielders when they are made, and, well, especially at third base all year long from Nick Castellanos, who dropped another pop-up. Did you see that, how bad he misplayed it over the weekend against the Dodgers? The sun got into his eye, supposedly, but you're a major league third baseman, and you can't get to that ball? I'm thinking, I was telling my brother and my dad, Doc, over the weekend that if I'm Jose Iglesias at this point and I'm playing, I'm going to get Castellanos' balls. I'm stealing Castellanos' balls.
Yeah, definitely. Vito, there's talk of him moving to right field. Do you have confidence that even if they move him to the outfield, that he's going to be a solid contributor? I don't think so. I think the move for Nick Castellanos is to put him at first base.
Yeah, it's only move maybe. Or DH, and you don't want him at DH because you have Cabrera at DH after next year. You have V-Mart next year unless he retires, which really would be a blessing in disguise. And can we ask him to retire? I mean, can the Tigers do that as a favor for us as fans and Tigers as an organization? Because Tigers could use that right now, V-Mart retiring, and Cabrera could already get into that DH spot a year earlier. Maybe that helps him stay, well, just more productive long-term the rest of the way.
That would be miraculous if V-Mart just left the game. That would be unbelievable. That'd be a huge favor for the Detroit Tigers, but it's not happening. When you got a guaranteed check, you show up, you labor it out, and you contribute in any way that you can, man. That's why you play. I think next year might be his last year, though, overall.
Yeah,
I don't
should be.
I don't see him getting another contract. But that series versus the Dodgers, man, it really was something to see, where you could see the definite competitive imbalance between the two squads. You saw the Dodgers with all the clutch hits. You saw the Dodgers being able to steal bases. You saw the Dodgers being able to play small ball. You saw them being able to close out games. And so they won 2 out of 3 versus the Tigers at Comerica Park. It wasn't all that competitive. I mean, the third game, the Tigers handled their business, and they performed well with Justin Verlander on the mound.
Yeah.
Credit to them for at least getting a game.
And getting some runs scored for him. Justin Upton.
No doubt
Dixon
about it.
Machado started it, right? And then Upton.
Justin Upton has carried this team for so long now. And it's nice to see a guy that, by all accounts is a good dude, good in the community, has really acclimated himself well after his really tumultuous start last year. He's kind of come back and been on an offensive tear, probably one of the best 3-game sit-downs of all time.
Yeah.
For those that forgot, when Justin Upton was struggling, Brad Ausmus decided, look, you got to take 3 games off, you got to rest, you got to watch what's going on. And once he came back from having 3 days off, dude's been on a tear. And it leads us to ask the question, and we've asked it quite a bit, but not from the Tigers' perspective, but from Justin Upton's perspective. Do you roll the dice and take a chance because you got the money in hand? He's got guaranteed $20 million plus for the next few seasons. Guaranteed. If he breaks his wrist, if he does anything, on the field, he gets all the money. Now, though, you look at his performance, smashing the hell out of the baseball, you would expect that it's going to continue. Would you take a boatload of money, maybe 30, 35 million a year, but maybe not as long, but at the same time, you obviously have to get more money? Do you take the gamble? Because based upon his performance, he could command 25 to $30 million a year, maybe for the next 7 years, in the neighborhood of like 7 years, $210 million, if he wants $30 million a year.
You can say that he's smashing the ball right now, but it's really a career year that he's having. Is it repeatable? And other Major League Baseball executives in the front office of these other Major League Baseball franchises might look at this season as a season that's not repeatable, as a season that, in so many words, is labeled as a mirage because he can't repeat it, too. At least as good as this, where he's smashing the ball, whatever adjective you want to use, or, verb to say, well, this guy's really hitting the heck out of the ball, which he is.
But Vito, the trend has been similar to what the Nationals did with Max Scherzer. You're going to take on 3 to 4 years that are garbage at the end, similar to now maybe what we're getting with Miguel Cabrera. We got the good end of the deal early on. Now we might be getting the 6 crappy years at the tail end of the deal. But if you're a team like Houston, you're a team like the Cubs, or you're a team that is really close again, making a push with big money like the Yankees or the Boston Red Sox, if you're one of those big market teams, do you make a contract similar to Scherzer where you pay him a lot more money at the end as well, or extend it out, but you give him a boatload of money early on where you pay him $30 million the first couple years and then it tails off as the contract ends to even it out? But if you're one of those teams, he's 30, 31 years old. I would take that risk for 2 or 3 years that he's going to have. I would take that risk that in the next 3 years, he's going to hit the baseball very effectively up until the age of 34 to take a chance to win a World Series with Justin Upton. I think he could be a key offensive weapon for a contending team. That's the gamble. So if you're sitting there at Justin Upton, what do you do?
Well, really quick, he'll be turning 30 on Friday of this week. JD Martinez, same thing, turned 30 this month. And we saw Martinez's value on the open market when he was a trade commodity. And the Tigers didn't get a good enough offer, a deal and package of prospects in return. Is that an indication of what the market is for these guys, these 2 corner outfielders, very similar ball players, as free agents come this offseason? Will the market not be as valid a one or as strong a one as these guys perhaps think, or they're just on paper they deserve based on their numbers this season at the plate? It could be that too. Maybe that scares off Justin Upton from opting out because then, well, if that's the case where the market's not as strong for you, JD has to enter free agency. He's going to be a free agent, but he might not cash in as much as we thought going into the season and as we thought maybe midway through the season and once they traded him to the D-backs. He might not get that handsome offer. And J Up might not as well, and maybe him and his agent or agents are considering that, and maybe because of that are trying to convince Upton to opt in to his Tigers deal.
Speaking to your point about the market for Justin Upton, dude's got a lot of control. He's got a no-trade clause to 20 teams that he can waive and say, no, if the Tigers come to him and say, hey, we want to trade you here, he can waive it up to 20 teams. So he's got a lot of control. But for me, I'm a conservative guy. If I got the money signed, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
I'm not risking it because of the fact that there is a small chance that the market could dictate that he doesn't get a great offer if teams decide not to want to commit to him long term. Maybe they'll give him a 2-year, $60 million deal. But maybe many teams nowadays won't be willing to give out those juicy contracts because they're starting to see that, it does start to hinder you later on. And it just really hurts owners to pay these guys $30 million a year for really bad performance. So I don't see too many owners willing to do it, and it limits the teams that you really can trade them to. They have to be big market clubs that can do that. And so if you're asking me, it's going to be about 75% that we see Justin Upton remain with the Detroit Tigers throughout the remainder of his contract. Justin Upton, get used to him. He's going to be a Detroit Tiger. And I would assume he likes it here because he seems to be active. He seems to be active in the community. Each and every day you go watch him, he seems to have the enthusiasm. He's got it pretty cush here in Detroit.
He's got 22+ million reasons, right, to like it in Motown right now. And he might not get paid as handsomely on the open market if he does opt out. So the safest bet for him, in order to not risk the biscuit, I don't think it's worth it to risk the biscuit. So I think he opts into his deal because you get paid now $22.125 million a season. That's a lot of money annually until 2021 if he does opt into his deal with the Tigers, where there's no certainty out there right now with the market and what it looks like, Doc, for him to be paid handsomely if he does indeed opt out. And I think the conservative viewpoint is that, but I think conservatives and liberals can both agree upon this point that J-Up is much more safe by opting into his Tigers deal than by opting out.
Before we take our first break, what did you think of that home run that was called a home run that just barely went over the fence versus the Dodgers? Because it was a very weird play in that he misses first base, gets to second, realizes, oh shoot, the call is a home run. Some people have said that by the letter of the law, there was a little chance that he could have been called out and the home run could have been negated. A very weird play in that the ball did get over the fence just barely, but Justin Upton missed first base.
Yeah.
He kind of does the extra long trot there, has to go back over second base, touch it, go back, touch first base, and then do the home run trot. What did you make of that play? Have you ever seen anything that weird before?
Well, first, I love when Upton hits a long ball because he stares at it, drops his bat, takes a long time to trot around anyways. So he had to go back to first base because if you miss a base, any base, second or third too, that's discounted as a home run. It's eliminated. The home run does not count if you miss a base while you're running around the bases. Have to touch each and every single one. So if he didn't miss first base, which I don't recall if he actually missed it, I think he went back just to play safe. I think he still might have hit first base, but if your foot does not touch a given base while you're rounding the bases for a home run, you can be called out and that home run is negated.
But does that situation have to have the other team notice it and then throw the ball to that base? That's what we call the appeal?
Yeah, they have to appeal it first. So if they don't notice it, don't try to appeal it, it doesn't even matter. Like, he could have just risked it, and just ran around the bases, and it wouldn't have been a big deal maybe because the Dodgers might not have even called the Tigers out on the carpet for it.
Imagine if it was an automatic rule where if you miss the base, you're out.
And maybe with new replay rules in the future or new automated, right, like bots just making calls like that, maybe they see it and maybe they're allowed to call a guy out based on that if he does miss a given base. And when we get back on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, by the way, episode 104 of the podcast doc, we'll talk a little bit of trivia and give you a few pointers about what we think regarding the Tigers and I guess their outlook, their bleak outlook for the rest of the way this season, Doc. And you're listening to Tigers Talk on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And Doc, as you know, our newest sponsor is Eastside Youth Sports Foundation. And if there is one thing we do know, it is that Detroit fans really love sports. That's why you're listening. Whether you're an armchair jock or an all-star player, you can help the next generation get into the game too. So the Eastside Youth Sports Foundation provides opportunities for boys and girls alike to experience a variety of sports, including baseball, football, yoga, and hockey. Because remember, kids who play together stay together, and they make new friends, learn teamwork, and make better choices. Girls and boys who are actively engaged in sports also do better in school, live healthier lifestyles, and make better overall choices. So now you might be asking, how can you help? Well, support the Eastside Youth Sports Foundation in its upcoming Try Sports for Free Day, September 23rd. Sign up your son or daughter, volunteer, or make a donation. Last year, the Foundation's Try Sports for Free Day introduced nearly 200 kids to new activities. So learn more about the Eastside Youth Sports Foundation at esysf.com. Once again, that website is esysf.com. And back here at episode number 104 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And it is something how far we've come into the season, too, looking at the Tigers and how bleak, their outlook is for the rest of the way. And you know what? There are so many games under 500 that they right now are as bad as they were back in 2005. 2005 was a down season, big-time down season, where they finished many games under 500 like they are bound to do this season too, Doc. And that was during the days of Alan Trammell, which segs me into a little bit of trivia I want to play with you to see your knowledge of Tigers past. Are you all right with that, Doc?
I'm ready, baby.
All right,
hit me up.
Let's hit it up. And I want to first present these stats. Okay, so I'm going to give you two different stat lines of, two different players. And here we go on the first one. Ready? This player had an 870 OPS from 1984 to 88. Who is this player?
Is it the aforementioned Alan Trammell, one that we've talked about, a player that we've talked about? You and I have texted regarding his managerial incompetence. Alan Trammell?
It is not, but it's his former teammate back during that era of great Tigers baseball.
Lou Whitaker?
Kirk Gibson.
Oh.
Now, I got this idea to do this because he was in the booth over the weekend with the legendary Armada native Dick Enberg, who was in town to call the weekend's slate of action.
Vito, I'm so glad you brought that up. I grew up listening to Dick Enberg, not calling baseball games, but calling tennis action. Each and every summer, he would call the U.S. Open. He would be the guy that you would definitely look to call great tennis matches. And so when I heard that he was going to call the games versus the Dodgers, I listened to every game, and I was like, wow, he has that voice. And my wife noted as well, my goodness, Dick Enberg sounds so relaxed. He sounds so casual. All the stories that he told from old-time baseball back at Briggs Stadium, it was so relaxing, and it was very nice. And I really felt like, you know what? I could do without Mario and Rod for the rest of the year. Give him a break.
Yeah,
put him on the sidelines.
Yeah.
I thought it was an upgrade. Didn't you think that Dick Enberg did such a great job? It's not that Mario and Rod do a bad job. It's just the classic, iconic voice, the delivery of Dick Enberg is so awesome and so easy to listen to that it draws you in. He's so conversational. He's got so much knowledge and background, and he's not really a homer. That's the thing that kind of comes across a little bit in terms of the broadcast that I'm kind of getting turned off by is, you know, whenever there's a fly ball, they get a little bit too excited, and it seems like every ball by the warning track is a home run ball. But Dick Enberg was smooth. I thought that his delivery, his cadence was awesome. I enjoyed all three games with him covering it with Kirk Gibson. It even elevated Kirk Gibson, in my opinion. It felt like he was on his game, really telling stories, and he wasn't as boring in these last three games as he has been in the past. At least that's what I noticed.
I guess Enberg got the best out of him, but great legendary Hall of Fame broadcasters get the best and or most out of you, right? Of their color, you know, guys, play-by-play partners. And Kirk Gibson had a few memorable moments over the weekend, too, when, well, most notably for me, when Alan Trammell joined the booth on Saturday. The game was also on FS1. So it was simulcast. It was on Fox Sports Detroit plus Fox Sports 1 on Saturday. And, well, Tigers had a chance to win the game, but we're not going to talk about that because we're talking about the signature voice of Dick Enberg. And there is something to the fact that he's a guy who doesn't have that homerism in his calls, where Rod Allen, Mario and Pemba, they get slapped. They're slapsticky, right? When it comes to calling Tigers games, they are homers. And for me, when you're too big of a homer as well, one guy most notably with the White Sox who's now retiring after the season, and Ken the Hawk Harrelson, those guys, they wear on you. They rub you the wrong way at times because they aren't critical enough. They are homers to a fault. And for me, that turns me away, turns me off from you and your play-by-play, game calling ability, your game analysis ability. Yeah, take something away from it. Where over the weekend, we had the non-homerism calls from Dick Enberg, and it meant something. He has that calming voice and that silky smooth, right? That silky smooth voice. And he brought the most out of Kirk Gibson. And one other little trivia, note to give to you here.
So far,
to see if
0
you
for
can,
1, I got to do better.
Yes, please do better. And this time around, maybe you'll redeem yourself here. This player, had a 3-year stretch where, on average, his OPS was 872. And this, by the way, this 3-year stretch took place from 1986 to 1988. Who is this player that I am talking about right now, Doc?
Was he on the Detroit Tigers?
Yes, this is Tigers trivia, remember, on Tigers Talk.
Okay.
But yeah, this guy played during the 80s. From 86 to 88 was a member of the Tigers.
Okay, I'm just going to ask for one hint. Was it an infielder or an outfielder?
Infielder.
It was an infielder. Was this the aforementioned Alan Trammell?
This was the aforementioned Alan Trammell. Finally, you clicked it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Good job,
All right.
Doc. 1 out of 2. We'll give you 50%. It's a failing grade, though, when you're going to school, right? Sorry, Doc. But you'll get better the next time around that we do this. And, well, maybe we'll do it again. I don't know. Next month sometime, because the Tigers are just so darn lackluster. And there's a few other things I know we want to discuss before we get the hell out of here this week, Doc.
You're right. In terms of the future, obviously this season is a wash. Al Avila came out. He came out over the weekend and said, look, we're kind of in a rebuild. We're looking for prospects. So he knows that the season is over. It's going to be very important now to evaluate who comes up in September, what they're able to do, and to evaluate what the Tigers actually have. You're likely to see Candelario again. You're likely to see others from the minors come up in droves when the call-ups happen in September. Now, I don't think that Justin Verlander is going to be traded. I do believe that there's more of an opportunity to make a bigger deal and to get more back when you make a deal this winter. So I fully expect Verlander to be on the Tigers roster the remainder of this season, and probably the big move will be made in the offseason. I'm still very much heavily invested in watching the Tigers. Obviously, as you could tell by my excitement talking to you each and every week, we don't take a break on this podcast. Even if the Tigers are playing terrible, we can talk about all the losses and all the things that we're seeing. We always want to fire up the microphones here on Tigers Talk. But for the season, obviously, it's coming to a close. But at the same time, there are still other teams that are coming to Comerica. The ticket prices are amazing. You can go see the Tigers play the Yankees for the low price of like $11. Check out DetroitSportsPodcast.com for all Detroit sports tickets. You can get great deals. So there's still great deals to be had out there. Going to Comerica Park now might be a little bit easier in the last month of the season. It won't be as busy. Probably average around maybe 28 to 32,000 per game, maybe even less during weekday games. Maybe you could go down there this Thursday. I believe it's an afternoon game, 1 o'clock game, and have a good old time for real cheap. So it's one of those things where, unfortunately, this season's over. We know it. But at the same time, there's still so many things for us to explore in terms of, are we confident in who's rebuilding? What's going to happen with Brad Ausmus and his contract, which expires at the end of this season? So lots to talk about. And for me, I'm still heavily invested in the Tigers. And the reason why you ask, why are you so invested? This team is in the toilet. They stink. Well, I declared the window shut a year ago. So my mindset was, this is over. You got Brad Ausmus and you're going to retain him? Al Avila, get the hell out of here. This is over. So for me, the sting comes in where you go, why isn't the organization moving faster? They should already be 365 days into the rebuild instead of only 20 days. So that's where my anger comes in, is that, dude, 2 podcasters out of Sterling Heights said, how the hell are you going to hire Brad Ausmus? Fine, you hired him, you rolled the dice. Al Avila, a new general manager comes. He gets to survey the landscape. He gets to decide. And you keep and retain Brad Ausmus? That's a fireable offense. If I'm Chris Ilitch, I go, dude, does this guy even know what he's doing to retain Brad Ausmus? This guy's not getting any better. You're not going to get that much better with Brad Ausmus. So that's where my anger comes in. So I'm not apathetic yet with the Tigers. I'm still hopeful because it's been 10 years now since we've seen a rebuild. So I'm excited to see what a rebuild could look like. And if it's Al Avila's job to do the rebuild, I'm going to be heavily invested in who has been acquired if the prospects that have been traded for are going to pan out. So I'm still excited, having a great old time watching Tigers baseball.
Really quick regarding the Brad Ausmus now diatribe that you just went on regarding Avila not firing him and Avila being at fault. Well, isn't Chris Ilitch, the owner, cheap? And what if he sent down a mandate to Al Avila to cut payroll and, to, go forward in a conservative manner? So they're not going to add a lot of payroll. They want to shed a lot of it. Well, if you're going to do that, won't you maintain Brad Ausmus as your skipper for another year? Because, nobody else wants him. So he can be had so darn cheaply that, if you don't go in the direction of retaining Ausmus for a 5th year as Tiger skipper, well, then you go forward with the new manager who you have to pay a new contract and maybe even more money or the same amount of money at least. So why not just retain the guy and stick with the same, have a little bit of continuity, and just save some money? I think they're in that market, in that mindset right now where they just want to save the almighty dollar and they don't care if they win or not, which they don't for next year specifically because they're in that rebuild/retool mode. But I think Chris Ilitch is this cheap owner anyways, so on top of the fact that they have to go younger, and I've realized that as a collective whole, I think they want to conserve money and shed money. So why hire a new skipper and pay him a contract when you can bring back Ausmus and do so cheaply too, Doc? That's my point, because I don't like Ausmus, but I think the Tigers will go down that route.
No doubt about it, Vito. You've earned the FCT award for this week. That has to be the freezing cold take of the week. Oh my God. That was Vito, that was atrocious. all of that.
An atrocious hot take. I think it's an atrocious hot take.
Freezing cold take.
Freezing cold take. Thank you.
You can't be cheap as an owner. Dude, you're a billionaire.
I'm saying he is. So this is the direction. This is the direction that the Tigers are going to go in. Not the direction I would go in as a Tigers owner, because maybe I would be more willing to spend some money. And if he was, well, you go hire a new skipper. But then also you look at next year, if you want to legitimize the rebuilding movement, you're moving in. Well, you legitimize that by not hiring a new guy who's going to just fail. You set him out for failure. If you know you're going to lose next year, which they're going to, and then you hire a new skipper who has no chance to win. That's another
I can see your line of thinking in that you don't want to cause instability ahead of a potential sale of the organization. Not that you would want to save money and not fire a manager, because you still got to put butts in the seats, but you don't want to just blow out the entire management when there might be a sale that happens for over $1 billion. So I could see that they want to keep things stable and keep the appearance that, hey, the books are getting back in order. Yeah. Hey, things are a lot better. One last thing on this podcast, and it was brought up and I messaged you. It's been a debate and something that I've seen on Twitter that people are talking about, and I can get your take on it real quickly because I obviously had a strong opinion as a fan, but people were wondering last week regarding what kind of manager was Alan Trammell when he was here with the Tigers? Because you got to remember, he was handed a really awful team back in the day prior to Jim Leyland coming here, prior to Dave Dombrowski being the general manager. Alan Trammell was given a team that was so bad that I don't even know if a Jim Leyland could have avoided over 100 losses. So he finished well under 500 as a manager. I believe he did a short fill-in stint either with the Diamondbacks or the Cubs. He never became a full-time manager again. I believe he was the interim manager for less than 10 games, when he had the second opportunity. But Alan Trammell, people are debating a little bit back and forth that it was not his fault that the team was so bad, that he was just saddled with such garbage that nobody in their right mind with any modicum of talent could have done really too much of anything. I disagree a little bit because the record was so bad that one season. It was really atrocious. And you look at it, there have been managers that have taken young teams and maybe not lost 100 games, but maybe potentially in the 70 wins and 92 losses kind of deal. So you look at it like that and you say, I kind of believe it's a little bit of both, that Alan Trammell wasn't really that great a manager, but combined with the recipe of the talent that he was given, he had no chance for success. And it's kind of a shame, too, because it kind of does tarnish his legacy a little bit in that one of the lasting memories we have of him is getting blown out of here in Detroit because of the job that he did. It was so bad.
But you know what? I would say this, too. He was a first-time skipper going into that horrible situation with no talent whatsoever to work with as a skipper. And the thing is, too, a coach can make a difference, but how big of a difference can he or she make? And especially when the talent is so barren as it was in 2003 when Alan Trammell entered onto the job. And prior to that, now, he had coaching experience at the major league level, but as a hitting coach, stuff like that. So roles that really don't set you up totally, or roles in which he didn't serve in long enough to set him up totally for that 2003 job when nobody could have handled it really better. Even Jim Leyland, who fast forward 3 years later after that, had the Tigers in a fall classic.
With the Tigers from 2003 to 2005, he won 186 games and lost 300. With the Diamondbacks in 2014, he only managed 3 games, won 1 and lost 2.
And after Gibby was fired, he took over on an interim basis.
So career record, 187 wins, 302 losses, .382 winning percentage. Well under 50% as a manager. But if I were to ask you what played more of a factor, his lack of managerial skills that caused all the problems, or the fact that the talent that he was given just didn't measure up?
Talent more than anything. 75% of it probably was that, or let's say 65 to 35, 65 in favor of the lack of talent. 35% was probably he wasn't ready and or well-equipped enough to be a big league skipper, and still at this point might not be well-equipped enough. But remember, you said it might have hurt his legacy with the Tigers. I think we still all view him as a Hall of Famer with the Tigers, a guy that should be in Cooperstown, still has a chance via the Veterans Committee to get in, and hopefully he does get in. And also, I think a guy that never deserved enough respect or got enough credit for what he did on the corner of Michigan and Trumbull for all those years playing shortstop, and a guy that should have won the most valuable player in 87. And after 05, even was brought back. Remember, he went out there, Game 2 of the World Series, and was out there for one of those ceremonial first pitches in Game 2 of the Fall Classic in 06. So the Tigers did bring him back, and now he is a special assistant to the general manager, too.
He can't even lose properly. The 2003 team was well on their way to shatter the Major League Baseball record of 120 losses, but they won 5 of their last 6 games.
I know, they blew it.
Yeah, so they finished the season losing 119 games his first go-around as manager.
Yeah.
I remember that season. It was so bad, Vito.
Yep.
2003. Doesn't seem like a long time ago, but it was right there. And it started the ball rolling in terms of, hey, it bottomed out in 2003. Started to get a little bit better once Dave Dombrowski was hired. Then he brings in Jim Leland. Boom. You bring in Pudge Rodriguez. And then you're off and running in terms of changing the face of the entire franchise by 2006.
An AL record for most losses in a single campaign in 03 with 119, as you noted, Doc. And a guy that Trammell actually managed, which I didn't totally realize, was Curtis Granderson in 05 when Granderson came up 9 games in 04. He played with the Tigers and 47 with the Tigers in 05. And the reason why you might find it interesting or weird why I'm bringing up Curtis Granderson's name again, but he is a free agent at the end of the season. And if your team's going to be miserable next year and you're not going to really do a great job of putting people's butts into the stands at Comerica Park on a game-to-game basis, wouldn't you maybe want to attain Curtis Granderson in the offseason, especially if he's available on a cheap contract, which he may well be? Think about that, because you're not going to win next year. It's a good PR story, man, if they bring him back to Motown. And we saw an example of it over the weekend against the Dodgers. Guess what happened when he made his first debut as a Dodger at Comerica Park? Applause aplenty at Comerica Park. People love themselves some Curtis Granderson. And I still remember this too, Doc. When they traded him, remember in that 3-way deal in which they got Max Scherzer? Do you remember how the public outcry was? It was so extreme because Curtis Granderson, their boy, a fan favorite, was dealt. Do you remember that, Doc? And that trade benefited the Tigers tremendously. And people still probably will harp on that as being a bad move made by Dave D, at least a little bit, because they lost their boy Curtis Granderson in the process.
Well, Vito, looks like you're like every other fan. You want to bring in a guy that's batting .229.
But OPS-wise, look at it. 978 with the Dodgers, 815 with the Mets, in 111 games. So a large sample size with the Metropolitans, too, in which he had that good of an OPS, which is very satisfactory, especially when you go into next year and you're probably not going to try to win very much as a Tigers organization.
And I know you were definitely focusing in on the applause. I was just focusing on the 0 for 4, his first game with the Dodgers.
Tigers made him look bad, but then he got Verlander, who he was hitting horribly against going into that at-bat in which he broke up the no-hitter and hit it off the foul pole at Comerica.
You got 90 seconds.
Yep.
L.A. Dodgers, are they serious World Series contenders? I like what they bring to the table. I like the fact that they went out and were aggressive to bring in Yu Darvish. Injured right now, but he'll be back. It's only going to be probably one missed start. I like the fact of what they put together. Real quickly, what's the update on Bellinger? Was it a serious injury or something that I know he rolled his ankle in the last game of the series. I think he went out.
I think it's something that he can recover from. I don't think they think he's going to miss the postseason. Something like that. I think he'll be back. So I don't think they're too worried about that. I think they're more worried about, just really quick, Clayton Kershaw, even though he just made a rehab start or something, but is on track to start again this season before the playoffs do begin too.
LA Dodgers, World Series contenders or no? I'd like to see them because there's a lot of great storylines, a great team, a lot of great players, and I really like the way that they performed here in Detroit at Comerica Park.
There's so much pressure, though, on the LA Dodgers to get it done this year after there has been that expectation that the Dodgers were good enough in the past to get it done, but have never gotten over the hump. Lost last year to the best story in baseball, the best team in baseball from day one, and the Chicago Cubs. The Dodgers are the Cubs of last year. They really are the best team from day one. The thing is, can they finish it? Well, by adding Yu Darvish, I think they have a strong enough rotation, led by Clayton Kershaw, a multiple-time Cy Young Award winner who was pitching like that before he got hurt this season. The thing is, in the postseason, not as great of numbers, so he has to turn it around a little bit or show a little bit more dominance, and if he does, it's not going to take too much, I think, for the Dodgers to get into the World Series. The NL is tougher. Is the tougher of the two leagues, though, because you have to get past the Nationals, the Cubbies. If they get to the postseason, remember, they have a lot of talent still. Maybe not as much this year, and I think what has happened this year to the Cubbies is they've had that World Series year after letdown, and they've underachieved subsequently. But the Cubs, if they get into the playoffs, they're a lot more scary than the Milwaukee Brewers or the St. Louis Cardinals this year coming out of the NL Central. So if the Cubs get there, they might as well surprise everybody and knock out the Dodgers. And I could see that being the NLCS matchup once again. So 2 years in a row where that matchup does occur. And I think the Dodgers get past the Cubbies, though, this time around. And because the rotation is better, is more than good enough, their bullpen is more than good enough, and they have all these complementary pieces, 1 through 9 in their lineup, even guys that sub in once in a while, like a Chase Utley, a veteran piece like that, and a veteran piece like Curtis Granderson, who was just added, that can come off the bench and produce for you a little bit. So they've got the youngsters and the veterans, a great mix of it, and that's why I think they're good enough this year to get over the top and at least to reach the Fall Classic, where right now I could see them facing the Tigers' AL Central rival, Cleveland Indians.
Woo-wee. All right, great podcast, sir. Always enjoy talking baseball with you. Makes podcast recording really fun because you're in the know and you're doing great things. And I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you, Doc, as well. And thank you to all of you for listening to episode number 104 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and company. Adios.